December 11, 1941. Berlin, under hard lights, Lorient under blackout. Voss at the chart. Attack windows counted like breaths as American mobilization slams the clock and the strangulation promise tilts. The pencil rides a straight edge and leaves a gray seam across the North Atlantic, a neat triangle, angling for a convoy that refuses to stay inside geometry. North Atlantic grid, chalked tight night surface approach set by habit grease pencil angle on the bow. Fuel minutes trickle away like coins through a wet glove, while escort carrier shadows smear the horizon and the perfect shot dissolves into weather and rumor. The board shows certainty. The sea answers with movement. Karaman concrete sweats and returns every sound with a damp echo. Diesel ghosts hang at nose height. Pencils align triangles in a disciplined fan that looks like control. Weekly tonnage drops into columns. Weekly hulls rise faster in numbers that belong to factories, not to men. The kill ledger flips without ceremony. The room keeps a careful hum generators purring behind walls thick enough to hold in fear. A metronome ticks beneath a hooded lamp. Grease pencil squeaks, then rests exactly 3 seconds between marks as Voss scans bearing drift and wind. The chart is cool and slightly sticky under his palm, as if the water has crept up through the paper to hold his hand in place. He breathes on a measured 5 count. The ruler is true. Training makes the air feel orderly. Silence slips in, engineered and familiar, but something wrong sits inside it. A missing tooth where rhythm should be. The first thump arrives late and soft, a low traverse through concrete followed by 2 more that climb the walls and fade into the table leg. The pencil point snaps with a dry click. Eyes tilt a fraction. No one speaks. Voss twists the tip sharp again and redraws the approach as if neatness can repair time. Radio taps enter like rain through wire. Bearings from shore. A contact from the gap. One clipped English line about a task unit making best speed. Mueller reads without color vowels flattened by practice. Voss converts the bearing to a moving box and sets the wolfpack fan to pinch a seam between escort arcs. The seam is narrower than last month. The night is not as deep as it used to be. Fuel is minutes of life. Torpedoes are breaths of relevance. He totals both in the margin where a careful hand has drawn circles for eels remaining and small ticks for the last salvo sent. The numbers are correct and strangely weightless. Kruger misseated a reload yesterday and Chance forgave it. Chance wears the uniform of skill for 1 hour and then deserts before morning muster. A brisk voice fragment rides the static from far west. A crane swing logged in minutes. A plate set a keel lengthened between lunch and dusk. Build bolt sail. The phrase fits in a pocket and weighs like lead. He feels the plot slide half a finger's width to the left without moving at all. He sees not a hunt, but a ledger hours, purchased and delivered against breaths and minutes spent. Another ladder of charges lifts and falls. Heart rate nudges past 90 and settles. Breath returns to its 5 count because discipline is scaffolding, not disguise. He steps back to take the whole board. The fan is beautiful and already obsolete. Escort coverage thickens like weather that has learned to keep appointments. Presence extends farther into darkness than his habits allow. He sets the new time, writes the new line, and understands the sentence the night has been trying to speak. Skill still matters. It no longer rules. Time, not nerve, is the weapon. They mocked the crate ships with easy laughter, as if a box with a keel could not cross an ocean without shame. They said Grumman's like a slur, big-boned cats, built by carpenters instead of engineers' wings, like barn doors paint like house paint. The contempt came smooth, practiced, and precise, and it fit the pride that had carried us through the first years. Hand-fit valves, honed seats, careful tolerances, strict sequencing, a doctrine that believed every minute saved by a shortcut would cost a life later. The sea likes pride until a clock outruns it. A yard film runs in my head while the pen scratches a fuel curve. A plate swings under a crane and lands on a line of chalk. The torch walks it shut. No fitting by feel, no filing of edges, until they kiss. The seam glows and cools, and the plate is a wall because the plan said it would be a wall. Another plate arrives before the heat has fully left the first. A riveter who used to make pans now closes a ship. A woman sets a bead as straight as a ruler. A siren sounds at the hour, and a line of workers turns over like a watch rotation on a boat. The pier stays full. The slip never sleeps. I want that film to feel like theater. It does not. It feels like weather. In our pens, a specialist carries a torque wrench like a chalice. He checks a value twice, then once again by instinct, not because he doubts the tool, but because doubt is our craft. He lives inside thousands of hours of schooling that teach you to distrust speed. Out there, a different liturgy has taken hold. You trust the jig. You trust the stencil. You trust the bin labels. You put part 14 into slot 14. And if slot 14 is empty, you fill slot 14 from crate 14. Not next week, but before the lunch whistle finishes echoing. I taste rust and canvas, and I know which religion feeds convoys. The contempt for crate ships was easy to repeat because it sounded like moral hygiene. Crude is careless, we said. Simple is for men who have no skill to manage complexity. Then the calendar began to answer back. A crane swing that used to take 10 minutes now takes 4. Pier time shrinks from days to a tight handful of hours. A cargo plan that broke men's backs last year runs on a pattern of chalk and whistles this year. The ledger gains a column called replacement, and that column turns red, numbers black. Craft does not disappear, it just stops being the lever. Grumman's were supposed to be heavy and slow. They keep arriving. A deck officer on an escort carrier writes down launch times that fit inside the margins of our old estimates like small stones dropped into a deep pocket. A crew turns into the wind, the engine notes climb, aircraft lift, and within a short stretch of minutes, the deck is clear, and then the deck is full again, and then it is clear again. A cycle becomes a beat. The beat becomes a presence. The night is thinner because something with long legs keeps stepping across it. I watch Mueller sort signal strips into trays that were never needed before. Each tray is labeled for a bearing group. The labels are ugly. They are useful. He moves faster because the system expects him to move faster. Craft teaches a man to protect his pace so he does not err. Availability teaches him to protect the next man's pace so the whole does not stall. My hand hesitates over the board and then sets the ruler with more force than necessary, as if pressure could stop the drift. The calendar punishes craft by making yesterday's precision the floor, not the ceiling. A new welding line opens in a yard we thought was out of river frontage. A barge becomes a factory. A truck bay becomes a spares depot, with bins ranked like books on a wall, numbers stenciled, parts wrapped paperwork, already attached to the package that will leave tomorrow for a ship that was only a rumor last week. I want to believe this is wasteful. The numbers decline to support my comfort. A convoy that should have lost 6 hulls now loses 2 and 2, more slide into the sea before our report is dry. Shock sound B filters through concrete again, and the room flinches in that trained minimal way. The thumps are not just weapons, they are declarations of reach. An escort wastes nothing by making us waste everything. A ladder of charges costs them minutes and standard patterns and a fresh crate of filled cans. It costs us fuel, which is minutes of life and steadiness, which is aim and a window that closes before it could open. The same beat that lifts aircraft is the beat that denies a perfect solution. Ron still argues for patience, for waiting on the seam that must exist if you plot long enough. He is not wrong about seam geometry. He is wrong about the nature of the cloth. The cloth is not fixed. It is being woven while we hunt faster than our hands can unpick it. Escort coverage bands thicken because steel hours were purchased last quarter and delivered this one. The mid-ocean gap is a story told to new hands, and they will not believe it the way we once did, because they will never truly see it. In the torpedo room, Kruger wipes sweat with the back of a wrist and reaches for a tool he has used since training. The handle is perfect for his grip. The rack behind him holds a spare that is good enough for any hand. He hates the spare on sight. He will use it if the first one drops. That is the divorce, written at human scale. Our habit says, keep the perfect tool working, no matter what. Their habit says keep enough tools within reach that the job cannot pause. A crane sets a prefabricated bow in a slow arc and settles it like a lid onto a pot. The chalk kisses the chalk. Welding torches make a stitched glow that walks around the seam. A whistle blows and the shift changes, but the heat in the metal never has time to vanish. A clerk stamps a tag, and the tag moves ahead of the part it describes so that the next station knows what is coming before it arrives. Motors cough on a pier and start on schedule. A deck log notes a time of departure that would have been a rumor last winter. A yard superintendent scratches his name next to a number he will beat next week. The film in my head stops feeling like propaganda and starts feeling like tide tables. The calendar eats pride because the calendar does not argue. It marks a launch. It marks another. It marks a sortie. It marks a recovery. It marks an hour of air where there was once a vacuum. It marks a convoy that is late by minutes instead of days, because spares were waiting in bins instead of waiting on men. I stand in a room built for hand-fit doctrine, and I can hear bins clicking open like distant locks being turned one after another until the whole ocean opens for the other side. A grease pencil still draws a clean line, a bearing still resolves, a firing solution still obeys geometry. None of that has lost worth. It has lost primacy. Craft is a blade honed and faithful, and the calendar has learned to keep grinding stones, moving across it faster than we can lift the edge for another pass. I put the pencil down and realize that contempt has become a superstition. The box with a keel crosses the ocean because 1,000 hands obey a clock. The heavy cat keeps flying because the deck does not waste the minutes between landings. The betrayal is not of skill. The betrayal is of the belief that skill can command time. The clock has chosen its allies, and it did not choose us. Night folds over the grid and makes a sheet of graphite where light cannot find purchase. The approach is textbook because that is what the sea has always rewarded. Shadow line, a beam, the convoy track, surface speed matched to wind, and swell the bow trimmed to hold a low silhouette without throwing spray. Bearings taken at strict intervals settle into a curve that whispers range. Angle on the bow resolves into a number that sits right in the bones. The helmsman breathes with the compass. The watch counts seconds under the hood. The cold has the exact weight of truth. The solution builds like a bridge no one can see. 2 marks, 3, 4 in even time. The ruler carries the arc into a path that ends where steel will be. The boat glides a fraction down moon to let the convoy's own wake hide the last of the glitter. The periscope eye kisses the surface and returns a smear of darker dark. It is enough. The gyro angles are clean. The spread is set with the same care as a surgeon setting a saw. Nothing in the world wants this more than the crew wants this line of numbers to be the last arithmetic required tonight. A hand finds the firing key and rests there for the space between 2 breaths. The hull seems to stop moving, though every gauge says it still walks the water. On the beat, the command goes. 1, then 2, then 3 eels slide and take the sea. In the control room, a thread of silence draws tight, then breaks, then tightens again, as men listen for what the ocean does with intent. The seconds are a ceremony. The first impact is not a sound, but a push that arrives through every surface. The second is closer to a hammer on a far wall. A low roll of flame crowns in the mind's eye. Someone lets out a breath he did not know he held. The world has snapped into confirmation. That satisfaction lasts less than the time it takes a pencil to touch a chart. Bearings pulse from stations ashore. The first cut of HFDF crosses one bearing with another and prints a guess at a position that is too near to be comfortable. A second station adds a third line. The triangle hugs the patch of sea where a perfect approach must have been perfect. The radio man hears this even when he does not say he hears it. His eyes move faster on the paper. His voice trims vowels down to wire. Radar teeth touch the sea farther out. Pickets ride the edges of the formation and bite into the night with sweeps that feel colder than wind. A half-minute ago, the surface felt like a place a skilled man could live if he kept to the rule book. Now it feels like a floor that can be lit at will. The order comes tight and low. Down. The boat obeys angle, exact ballast, obedient a practiced slide, under the skin of the water. Depth settles with the same confidence as the sight picture had settled. Confidence is a habit, not a prediction. Noise arrives as geometry. A destroyer accelerates, and the propellers tell the truth about its intent. The rhythm is not a patrol rhythm, it is a knife rhythm, hard and committed. The sound knife splits uncertainty into a vector and an estimate of time to reach. Voss moves his pencil the way he has moved it 1,000 nights. The line that should carry the boat away from the first pass requires fuel minutes that the tank can spare, but not many. He feels the subtraction in the hand more than he does in the head. Metric Y slides. The table leg hum rises with speed. Depth charges are thrown by drill and pattern, and violent memory. The first ladder arrives short, the second, long, the third, correct. Shock sound B takes hold of the hull and works the air inside the men. It is overlapping slightly out of phase, layered in threes that do not respect breath. The bulkheads remain loyal, the dials waver and return. A pencil makes a mark, and the lead skates a half millimeter wide, because hands have bones and bones vibrate under pressure waves. The metronome in the blackout hood is useless here. The sea keeps time now. Kruger moves in the torpedo room with the solemnity of a churchman who expects the roof to fall. The sea has a hand on the boat, and the boat has a hand on him, and the reload that he has completed under drill 100 times becomes a task he must do inside a moving doorway. The cradle catches and releases. The trolley pitches. He seats the fish into the guide, then feels the wrong kind of resistance, a small bite where there should be glide. He pulls, reseats, breathes, and loses the beat for a heartbeat. It is enough to make him taste metal. He forces it home because he is a professional, and because the alternative is to belong to the panic that waits on the other side of this thin door. Mueller drops a clipped call sign and hates himself before the last consonant finishes. The correction lands flat. He repeats the group without apology and moves the next strip into the proper tray. The ugly tray makes him faster. He will not say that out loud. He can feel bearings becoming lines, becoming a net the size of a sea. Above them, radar makes light where light has no business being. The escort carrier turns into wind, and the deck crew does the unthinkable within minutes. Engines call out through spray. Hooks bite. Wheels kiss the deck and lift again. The beat of launch and recover folds into the beat of search and report. The air has learned to hold position like a destroyer, and it brings its own geometry to a fight that used to be about a single skilled man finding the seam. The boat lies quiet in the layer, while the destroyer's screws pass overhead with the sound of iron sawing iron. Voss runs the next evasion line. The fuel curve shortens in the margin by numbers that used to be abstract, and now feel like heartbeats being used up to stay in a place where nothing can be earned. He writes the new minute and sees it as a breath spent on the wrong thing. His fingers leave a faint smear on the damp paper. The smudge is small and humiliating. Another ladder walks toward them, closer, then past, then back. The hull flexes like a chest under a heavy man's heel. Gauges stick and free. The helmsman's jaw muscles tick once and then do not tick again. Training does not allow repetition of tells. The spread that ran true a few minutes ago has purchased only attention. Attention is a currency the enemy can mint at will. Pickets talk, HF, DF talks, air talks. Proximity fuses talk with light when anything climbs above, and the talk has started to overlap into song. A plan exists for this. It requires a course change that will trade depth for distance, a decoy pattern that will give the enemy a shadow to hit, and a timed power burst that will cost fuel the boat cannot comfortably spend. Voss draws it as he has drawn it many times. The pencil obeys. The nerves object. He listens through the objection for the change in the screws that says the destroyer has committed to a run from a different angle. He hears it. He feels it in the table more clearly than in the ear. The order moves out of his mouth with a steadiness he does not inspect too closely. The boat executes. The decoy goes loose and makes its small pretend signature, a toy heartbeat, offered to a sea that has learned to count. Charges walk toward the toy. Some accept the lie. Some do not. The ones that do not belong to men who have learned to distrust their own patterns and seat a can one notch short to land a little late and a little near, on purpose to keep a hunted man guessing. It is a kind of skill no one will brag about. It is the kind that multiplies under orders. He looks again at the chart and understands that his craft is now employed in the service of getting away from the habit of using it. Every correct choice costs minutes. Every minute buys a little safety and sells a little chance to matter before dawn. The math is clean and pitiless. He tries to hate it and finds there is no one to hate. The ocean is full of coverage. Coverage is not an enemy. Coverage is a condition like weather. The next periscope raise is quick and low, nothing more than a lick at the skin of the night. A cone of glare where no moon waits betrays a searchlight finding its own mist. The air up there is thick with judgment. Proximity fuses flash where the sky meets spray as a pilot tests a line and gets rewarded with a flower of white that would have killed a man if a man had been there. No one is there because the doctrine has learned the same arithmetic Voss has learned and has decided not to present a target at that height for that long. Breathing returns to training. The heartbeat comes down in steps. 98, 92, 88. The pencil lays a final line for this phase and lifts. The line is neat, and the neatness mocks the purpose it served. They had done everything right. The run was clean, the spread was true, the explosions were real. The sea answered, with a voice full of instruments. It kept the melody and added sections until the soloist was only a memory of how the piece began. He checks the fuel again and writes the number. The number does not flinch. Minutes of life have been used to purchase an absence of chance. He listens for one more pass and hears it fall away into distance that is not safety, but management. The enemy manages presence now. Presence brings options by the handful and spends them without pause. The crew remains steady because that is what they are. The doctrine remains elegant because that is what it is. The discipline that once cut water now cuts pride. He allows himself one thought the training does not require. There is no seam left that a single hand can open. There is only a field where hands are not counted individually anymore. He closes his eyes for the span of one breath and opens them on the board. The next move will be correct. It will also be small. The sea has become full of coverage, and in a full sea precision becomes the art of not dying rather than the art of deciding. Shock arrives layered a choir of metal and chemistry that takes the hull in both hands and shakes until teeth click. Ladders of charges overlap so tightly that there is no space for breath between rungs. The room loses its edges. Loose pencils walk on the table by themselves. The generator hum becomes a higher note, as if current is trying to escape its own wires. Heart rate jumps from the calm low 80s to 120 in a single bad sentence written across the body. Training tightens the throat and opens it again. Breath returns because it has to, not because it wants to. Air strikes cycle like a mill, relentless and precise. The escort carrier turns into wind and throws metal into the sky, as if the deck were a spring. The beat that launched search now launches punishment. The first run thunders across water just above imagination, the second arrives before the ear has filed the first. Each pass writes a pressure paragraph on the hull plates. The ballast groans like an old hinge. Voss feels the table leg transmitting the ocean's handwriting into his bones. The plot board is no longer a plan, it is a confession. Orders come with the flat calm of a voice that has practiced not to shake. Angle for deep, trim hard, flood to mark, silence the pumps at the count. The boat tips her nose with the steadiness of a creature choosing a darker burrow, not fleeing but downgrading hope. Depth answers with its own pressure. Needles creep. Fingers rest on valves without touching them. The hull becomes the only clock that matters, and it is loud. Shock sound B reaches an obscene fullness. 3 patterns converge, one short, one long, one corrected by a man overhead who has learned to be a little wrong first so he can be more right after. The sequence does not respect human timing. It interrupts breaths and replaces them with its own punctuation. The bow braces against a slap that is not quite a blow, then endures the blow that follows. Light dusts down from somewhere that engineers meant never to shed. A cup tips and does not spill because the hand that holds it refuses to allow a second error. Voss watches his own hand. The pencil he broke earlier has been sharpened to a perfect cone. The cone wants to skate on the damp paper. He sets it down and moves it anyway. Fuel becomes minutes, minutes become options, options become fragments. He draws the line that bends a little more than doctrine permits to buy distance from a noise that will otherwise teach the destroyer the rhythm of their fear. The line is small treason disguised as seamanship. He knows it. He lets it stand. Kruger waits for the next word with a wrench that is both a tool and a promise. He is ready to load again in a room that is now the inside of a drum. Each impact makes his elbows soft for a sliver of a second and then hard again. The misseat from before has not repeated. Shame makes men precise, but shame is also an acid. Müller keeps his vowels flat and his consonants clean as he passes the last bearing group he trusts. He corrects one digit and does not look up. In his box, the ugly labeled trays look like an insult someone else will have to win a war with. The air outside recycles its violence. A pilot rolls off target and the next takes his place. A destroyer turns on a pivot and the screws announce intent like a tongue between teeth. The layer that should hide the boat is stirred by a ladder that lands too near to be ignored and not near enough to be efficient. The math upstairs has passed from search into management. Voss recognizes it and hates it for its clarity. Presence has learned to be economical. He reaches the end of his row of choices and finds the oath he wrote into himself when he first trusted a boat to hold him. Never break contact while there is fuel to chase. Never spend the night making distance when distance is the enemy of meaning. He has repeated it in mess rooms and on piers and under his breath in quarters that smelled of oil and hope. It has always felt like armor. The next pattern lands out of sequence and makes men wait for a follow-up that does not come. The waiting is worse than the slam. Heart rate jumps again and stays high. He meets Ron's eyes for a fraction and sees Doctrine staring back, steady and proud and useful in every condition, but this one. The ship above them is adjusting a habit in real time. The air wing is turning recovery into another launch with a clock that refuses to be impressed by ceremony. The sea is full of choices that are not his. Break contact. The words exit his mouth without ornament. They are not shouted. They do not need air they cannot afford. They travel across the compartment and land with the weight of a signed order. Helm answers. Trim answers. Engines answer. In the small way, engines answer when men are trying to become a rumor. The boat dips, turns, and offers the enemy a wake that points in the wrong direction. A decoy slides from its rack and finds its tiny role in a Broadway that only machines can see. Shame arrives with heat in the face and cold in the hands. It is not the shame of cowardice. It is the shame of discovering that the shape of courage has changed while you were still drawing the old outline. Skill remains inside every motion. It simply no longer gets a vote on outcome. He can feel the difference in the way his body accepts the order it just gave. The chest loosens. The jaw tries to hold on and then lets go. The metronome in his head tries to reassert cadence and finds that a new time signature has been chosen without him. The boat listens harder than any human can. Silence running becomes the only song that matters. Pumps still. Valves cease to whisper. The crew moves with the particular slowness that is faster than haste. A map that was once a set of opportunities collapses into a map of survivals. Voss writes the new course in small figures that refuse to look at him. He feels 120 heartbeat strikes, collect behind his ribs, and then begin to pay down towards something more survivable. That decrease feels like betrayal because it feels good. Charges chase the decoy and reward the lie with thunder. Some fall late, some fall early. A few fall where they have learned the decoy goes when men are desperate. The men upstairs have their own book now, and it is thick. The boat slides under the layer and steals a handspan more water between herself and instruments. The gauges find their numbers, like dogs finding a rug. The bow points a little off the wind that exists beneath waves. The stern releases a clutter of tiny sounds that will be mistaken for machinery that is not worth killing. He makes a note on the margin, where only he will read it later. Not an apology. A record. The fuel he preserved will not make tomorrow brilliant. It will make tomorrow available. He wanted his craft to deliver victories that could be circled in grease, pencil, and admired. Tonight it delivers odds. Odds are ugly. They are also real. The calendar has defeated the oath, not with better men, but with more presence. The voice that used to lecture in his head begins another sentence and stops. There is no sermon that saves a boat from arithmetic. The doctrine that taught him to worship precision has not betrayed him. It has simply been outflanked by a clock that can manufacture hours. He sits with that knowledge like a weight on the lap, not crushing, just undeniable. The boat continues to move in the dark, and every movement is a quiet admission. He lifts his eyes to the board one last time before the next phase erases this one. The fan of lines from earlier has been trimmed to a thin thread that slips away from teeth. He touches the paper with 2 fingers, not to feel the sea in it, but to affirm that the world still allows touch to mean something. The next command he gives is gentle and exact. The boat obeys as she always has. The skill remains. The rule is gone. The dock is quiet, in the way a machine shop is quiet after hours, smells left behind to do the talking. Oil rides the air with salt and a thread of cordite that no one will admit to noticing. Concrete sweats a little. Lines creak on bits that were set when the tide still believed in schedules. Lanterns throw short pools of color and leave most of the world to guess at its own edges. A canvas roll sits on a bench like an heirloom. The German wrench set opens with soft clicks, each tool nested in felt, each handle patterned by the hands that earned it. Steel polished to a low glow tolerances you can feel in the way the jaws close without opinion. He has carried these shapes through training, through drills, through nights, when care felt like prayer. He turns one in his palm and watches the contour catch the lantern and give it back as a thin, disciplined line. Across from the bench is a hatch cover from a Liberty that has seen more weather than ceremony. The combing was cut fast and closed faster. Welding beads walk the seam like hurried stitches that still hold flesh together. The paint is too thick in places and too thin on the corners. Rust freckles the rim where boots have argued with salt. There is a nick along the edge where a chain found purchase because someone was impatient or practical or both. It is not ugly. It is not beautiful. It is a fact. He palms the pitted steel and feels the story tell itself without nouns. Heat once lived here, then cold, then heat again, a rhythm that cares only about work done and work waiting. His fingers find the ridge of a bead and follow it like a railroad you can drive by touch. The metal is warm from the day and cooling toward night. It yields no secrets, offers no excuse, refuses pride. Behind him the water breathes against the key. Somewhere an engine coughs and turns, then quits, then tries again and succeeds, because trying again was always the plan. A clerk walks past with a clipboard and a pencil, and does not look at the rank stitched on anyone's sleeve. A crane wire sighs and relaxes. Someone laughs once short and private, at nothing the war will remember. Ron stands a pace away and watches the way the wrench sits in the hand like a thought, perfectly shaped. He does not touch the hatch. He does not have to. The contrast arranges itself. The tools are an argument. The steel is a verdict, counted as arithmetic. Voss says, voice low enough that paper will not try to record it. We traded attack windows for headlines. We believed breaths were enough to drown an island, but hulls per week and planes per day kept lifting the surface under them. Ron's jaw makes the small motion it always makes just before he answers a junior. The motion does not finish. The answer changes shape on the way out. Headlines are not ships, he says soft, but ships are ships. Every volley buys attention, Voss says, thumb running the beat again. Attention is now cheap and abundant. They mint it on decks. The lantern knocks once in a gentler wind. Muller is not here to carry dignity through consonants. Kruger is not here to hold his wrench like a sacrament. The set remains open on the canvas, beautiful and silent. It would be a kindness to put it away. It would also be a lie. He leaves it open. A river tug noses by obscene in its confidence, and shoulders a barge into place with the patience of a butcher lining up another cut. On the barge sit crates stenciled with numbers that mean nothing to tradition and everything to delivery. A man with a pencil behind his ear confirms a list without looking up. The barge slips its mooring, like a sentence finishing itself. He traces a circle on the hatch paint, where a boot heel has polished the surface down to a hard shine. The circle is the size of the pause between breaths. The paint around it is scuffed and scarred and working. The hatch has not failed. The finesse on the bench would never fail either. One of these things makes a promise to a single hand. The other makes a promise to a calendar. Fuel was minutes of life, he says, as if the dock needs reminding. Torpedoes were breaths of relevance. We were careful with them, and that care felt like virtue, but the count was never ours to keep. Their hours arrive on time. Their hours return on time. Our minutes burn to buy a chance against a schedule. Across the basin, a deck gang lifts a section with a crane that knows exactly how much to bend. The chain sings as weight rises. A man with a flag moves his arm in a lazy half-circle. The section travels the air like a punctuation mark toward a sentence that was set at dawn and will end before the shift horn. Sparks kiss the dusk and die. The work does not slow to let them be mourned. Say it properly, Ron murmurs, eyes on the hatch. If you are going to say it at all. He does not add flourishes. He does not look away from the combing. The sum of attack windows and chase minutes is defeated by hulls per week and planes per day. Ron closes his eyes, for the time it takes a knuckle to whiten and release. The words do not cut him. They file something down that has been proud for a long time. This is not complaint, Voss says. It is a charge sheet. What law does it cite? Ron asks, tired without saying so. Time, Voss says. And the crime is our doctrine, asking craft to command it. The wrench set looks like a shrine now, and he hates that. Tools should not be asked to carry theology. He selects one spanner and closes the jaws on the hatch rim. It fits because steel is steel. He twists not to tighten anything but to feel how play disappears the moment the geometry says it should. The liberty does not resent the careful grip. It ignores it. The hatch will open when a schedule tells it to open, and will close when a schedule tells it to close. The spanner is only a guest. A gull lands on a bollard and tucks its head without ceremony. The tide changes its mind. He looks up and notices the stars have gained a foothold in the metal halos. Somewhere farther out a whistle trades questions with another whistle, and both come away satisfied. The dock is a throat, and the hour clears it. He lays the spanner back, teeth wiped clean, and leaves the roll unlatched. The hatch keeps its heat for a few breaths more, and then gives it to the night. He wants to feel lost like a break in a bone. He feels it like a ligament stretched past comfort and asked to hold anyway. Waste has been collected in neat little piles inside him for months. Tonight the piles have labels. They are stacked by date and tied with string. A petty officer from another outfit passes with a coil of rope over his shoulder and gives them the nod that men give when they recognize work in any language. Voss nods back and watches the man go. The rope is new. It will be old in a week. In 2 weeks it will be spliced, then turned, then gone. Replacement does not apologize for arriving. He looks at the hatch one last time and knows he will remember the feel of the bead more than the shape of the wrench. That is not betrayal. That is an admission of what the war has become. The calendar has taught the sea a new grammar. Precision conjugates beautifully and still finds itself a clause inside another clause that carries the meaning. Write it down, Ron says, almost to himself. It is already written. Voss answers and taps the combing with 2 fingers, like a seal on a document. The docket is the ledger. The verdict is the launch list. Sentence carried out daily. He closes the canvas halfway and leaves it that way, a courtesy to pride that does not claim to be more. The dock settles into the kind of silence that makes engines louder in memory than in air. Somewhere a bell marks a half hour. He counts reflexively and stops. The count is not his anymore. The work goes on without him, and includes him only when he stands where it needs a pair of hands. Morning puts a thin shine on the pens and turns the water into a ledger you can read at a glance. The dock crews move as if the night had been a rehearsal for daylight. Cranes speak in syllables. Trucks answer with brakes and clutches. A clerk's pencil ticks along a manifest, and the tick sounds like a clock that has learned how to issue orders. He watches it all and feels the old fear take its final shape. The craft he was taught to revere is not gone. It is simply no longer sovereign. Acceptance does not arrive as a speech. It arrives as a measurement that refuses to blink. Sortie hours stack against escorted ton miles, and the stack determines how much sky a convoy owns and how much sea remains usable. The figure is ugly in its honesty. When the hours aloft per mile rise, the night thins. When the miles guarded per hour widen, the gap closes. You can put any gallant story over the top of that, and it will peel away in the salt air. He stands by the hatch he touched last night and thinks of how many hands will cross it before noon. Each hand will take seconds and return minutes to the larger system. The arithmetic no longer flatters the individual, and that is precisely why it works. A pilot's skill matters, but the schedule that guarantees his replacement matters more. A destroyer captain's nerve matters, but the standard pattern that keeps him on station matters more. The doctrine has shifted its altar. Worship belongs to presence. He tests the idea out loud, not to make it grand, but to make it stable. A boat's torpedoes remain breaths of intent. Fuel remains minutes of life. Neither can command the calendar. The calendar now moves metal, introduces air on time, replenishes crews before fatigue writes its own orders. The opponent has taken hold of the only resource that multiplies every other resource. Time is not a backdrop. Time is a munition. The old pride aches as it yields. He honors it by describing what defeated it with precision instead of resentment. Prefabrication shortens steel hours per hull. Welding lines turn pauses into flow. Spares bins pre-solve tomorrow's breakdowns. Escort carriers convert flight deck cycles into patrol hours that overlap until the ocean feels crowded. None of this sneers at craftsmanship. It simply refuses to wait for it. He imagines the board he once kept as a moral instrument, lines converging on a perfect firing solution. The board has a different grammar now. Lines describe coverage, not courage. Arcs describe endurance, not hope. The best choice for a skilled crew is still the best choice, but the field on which that choice operates has been graded and drained by men who think in throughput. That is why the same choice pays less each month. Numbers, when they are honest, end debates. Steel hours to escorted ton miles per week, the ratio fuses material and motion into one sentence that even a proud doctrine must read aloud. Raise the numerator by speeding fabrication and staffing yards, and the sea gains guardianship. Raise the denominator by extending range and repeating cycles, and the same guardianship spreads thinner costs over wider lanes. The ratio is not a metaphor. It is a tool that sets tempo. He lets the shame of the last order cool into a recordable fact. Breaking contact saved a crew and preserved a hull that could no longer decide the convoy's fate. The act had felt like a theft from his oath. In the daylight, it looks like compliance with a higher rule. Preservation properly used returns trained hands to a system that needs hands more than it needs moments of isolated bravado. The calendar pays interest on prudence. From the basin comes the day's first deep horn, and a slow churn as a tug shoulders a ship toward water that will belong to it because men have made time belong to it. He can name every fine edge he respects and still admit that the edge that matters most is the one a clock cuts through delay. He will still sharpen tools. He will still choose elegant lines. He will do all of it inside a doctrine that counts hours before it praises skill. He writes the metric in a small, clear hand as if it were a bearing to steer by. Sortie hours per escorted ton-mile. Then the fuller statement that will keep the bearing true when pride tries to bend it. Steel hours to escorted ton-miles per week. He reads both aloud once, not as a benediction, but as a checklist item, to be verified by operations. Time became the decisive munition. Availability turned craft into delay. The ratio wrote the war's ending.